Am I? Okay. Hi, everybody.
Lucy Fisher and Doug Wick, our producers.
Just to prove that it happened.
And most importantly,
And Veronica Roth. Okay, we're good to go. Stephen?
Hi, congratulations everybody. I'd love to ask Neil and Veronica. Veronica, you've got a big producing credit along with Lucy and Doug on this movie. So what were your anxieties or considerations about the adaptation of this trilogy for you with the movies? And Neil, working with Veronica, was that inhibiting in any way, having the authors so plugged in to what the movie was going to be?
My anxieties, I think, are just, the standard anxieties of any author who hands over their work to be adapted. But I also know, from the second the book hits the shelves, it stops belonging to the person who wrote it and it starts belonging to everyone who reads it. So I was pretty well practiced in letting it go a little bit, which I think is a good thing. Because there's no way that they can be exact replicas of each other, and they shouldn't be. They're different mediums, so that they should communicate in different ways. And so my anxieties were very much assuaged by the people I chose to hand it over to. And I had a lot of trust for them in the decisions that they would make. And I think it seems like that trust was well-founded since I love the movie. So I'm really happy with the way it all turned out. But I think that's the key, is just, for me, was finding people that I trusted to respect their work and to love it and to do good things with it.
For me, the challenges for me were the same for Doug and Lucy, who started out developing the screenplay. It was really fitting all of that story into a movie, and because we really loved the story and loved all the different characters and all the different events. But a movie is just a different beast in the book. She's written something that's 400 plus pages, and we're working with something that's 100 pages, and just has different needs, different dramatic needs. And so really the challenge was just fitting all that story that we loved, into it. And there are a lot of events in the movie, and they are compressed, and it has kind of a crazy pace because of that. And I think we really just decided to just get it all in there as best we could. And so the trick was to make that work.
Was it inhibiting at all because of your other movies?
Oh, to work with, Veronica's really unpleasant, and it's and very intimidating. No, it was fantastic actually, because the world is in creating a world of the movie. There are so many questions that come up, and so to have the source right next to me or at the end of the phone, and to be asked, like, where do they use money? Where do they get? What do they do? What happened? And what happened 100 years ago, really? And what's also happening down the line? What's coming in the next? Because she hadn't finished writing the third book when I was prepping the movie, and so it was fantastic to be able to get an insight and to actually just hear what the truth was behind all of it, so that we made sure that all of our characters were on the right path in our movie. Thank you.
Veronica, my question's for you. Sorry, I mispronounced your name. Can't speak today. I was going to ask you, the idea of this came to you, I think, when you were a freshman in college, and I would imagine that some of the ideas of this are from, when you're going into college, you have to take your SATs, and then you got to declare a major, and you got to say who you're going to be for the rest of your life when you're 18 years old.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, how those ideas came about. And secondly, we were talking a little bit before this about where are the arts people in these groups? Where are the creatives, the poets, the writers, the musicians? Where do they fit into this world?
Okay. No, I know where they fit in. I'm trying to remember. What's your first question?
About
college.
the idea of
Oh, right, gotcha. Okay, sorry. Lost it there. Well, really, I think that you have to choose at 16 thing is more of an emotional reality for young people than an actual reality, because obviously we know, when you grow older, that you can change your mind, you can change your career, you can, change your whole life. You don't have to pick it like that at 18. But when I was 16, I felt like I had to decide right now. You know, figure out what classes you're going to take, make sure you get good grades, like prepare your college application, you know, pick your major, like plan your whole life. And that felt very real to me, so I wanted it to be on the page. And that's, you know, that's why 16 and not 18, because that was the age for me. And I was like, why are people pressuring me to decide all this? As far as the artists go, each faction has their own form of artistry, I think, especially Amity and Dauntless. So Dauntless, tattoo artists, especially, although more in the book sense of the tattoos than in the movie. And then Amity, of course, yeah.
This question is for Doug and Lucy, and Neil can even chime in a little if you'd like. One of the key aspects of this film is the fact that you have a meld of a small amount of CGI with a great amount of practical locations, practical sets. With a film of this magnitude, many directors and producers would have elected to go all CGI or more. What were some of your considerations in making the decision to go with practical locations and sets over the CGI?
The answer to that, which I'll turn it over to him in a second, was fully a Neil point of view. And from early on, when we started to talk about where we would shoot, as you know, everyone goes to the rebate city. And when you look at the finances, you're always saying, well, if you have $5 more million to put on screen, and Neil from the beginning made an impassioned argument that he had to shoot in a real place or would feel like another computer world. And he made that argument so articulately that as you were looking at the $5 million rebate versus shooting in Chicago, he made the best argument that the creative value of shooting there would more than make up for whatever the financial loss was of not going to a different rebate place.
Yeah, my feeling was, how do you make it different? We've seen lots of movies set in the future, and dystopic and post-apocalyptic movies, and they often have some great CG cityscape that's kind of cool and is a real, perhaps, visual effects achievement, but still always feels a little like, well, that's not really real. You know it's not real. And so I thought, well, how do we make this movie, one, different, and two, because it is so much about human nature, it's about Triss and all these characters and being very real with them, how do we make the setting real? And I thought, well, there's one solution will solve both those problems, and we shoot it in the real place. We shoot it in Chicago, which has a monumental skyline, and we use. If you figure that the city was mostly spared damage from the catastrophe that happened over 100 years ago, then the same way that New York looks pretty much like, you go downtown in New York, it looks like New York looked 100 years ago, plus or minus some glass building. I figured that Chicago might be the same 100, 200 years from now. And so it was just a way to make it look really different, and to keep it real, have the characters on the streets, the real sun in their eyes, interacting with real locations.
We also found the city so beautiful that when we came back with pictures and showed the studio, they could kind of only gasp themselves at how beautiful it was. And Veronica populated the book with so many landmarks of Chicago, and that did help ground, just make it seem accessible and make it seem, as Neil said, recognizable. And a funny thing happened to me, which is we had done such a good job of selling the studio how we had to be in Chicago because it was so real. And Doug and I were driving around Chicago the first day, and we passed the Ferris wheel. I said, oh my God, it looks just like the Ferris wheel as she described it. And he turned to me and said, it is the Ferris wheel that she described. So, and our actors really do climb the real Ferris wheel that she described. And they weren't stunt doubles, there was really our real actors out there in the freezing cold. So there's something that makes it a little less sci-fi and makes it a little bit more like we're people, but we're in a different time period.
It gives you a you are there quality.
Just to add one more thing about Veronica. The last author we worked with was in much less of a position to have notes, and that was F. Scott Fitzgerald. And so we were certainly anxious, because the book was such a phenomenon, about meeting Veronica and how she would react. And one of the real pleasures for us, and I'm still sort of still shocked at her openness, is we had the production office in Chicago, and she would come and she would see the production designer's sketches of, and now starting to understand that 100 artisans had been hired and would start to render the things that she had made up. And as she would look at the architectural sketches, she'd always look through and she'd kind of go, oh, that's a really good idea. And it was with just sort of an openness and a respect for other creative people doing their kind of work.
I watched the movie last night, so I don't want to compare it to other novels in our generation, but I think it's inevitable because, it's targeted at teens and it's set in a dystopian future. So did you guys feel any pressure, like distinguishing Divergent from other movies at this time?
Yes. No, yeah, of course. I mean, my feeling was that I wanted to make it. It is obviously has a female heroine in the future, and but my feeling was that I wanted to make it obviously as different as possible than those movies, and often those we were just talking about that. But often those movies they're sort of grim and sort of gray and bleak and post-apocalyptic, and so one thing was to kind of tip it a little bit more toward, at least in the beginning, toward kind of a utopia in the beginning, and to actually shoot it in a much more luminous and light kind of way. Trish wants to be part of this society, wants to find her place in it, and so we tried to actually make it seem to be initially a society that was worth joining before you obviously start to see the cracks in all of it. So, but I think it's a very different story. She's not on the run the whole time. She's not just trying to survive. She's actually having really complex relationships with a whole variety of people, with her friends, with her parents, with her mentors, with her sort of superior officers, with people who are trying to help her, with her people who are trying to undercut her the whole time in a kind of a real world, even